John chapter 16, verses 16 to 33. Jesus went on to say, "In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me." At this some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? And because I am going to the Father?" They kept asking, "What does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he's saying." Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So with you. Now is your time of grief. But I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. In that day you will no longer ask me anything. Very truly I tell you, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask, and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. Though I have been speaking figuratively, a time is coming when I will no longer use this kind of language, but will tell you plainly about my Father. In that day you will ask in my name. I am not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me, and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and entered the world. Now I am leaving the world and going back to the Father." Then Jesus' disciples said, "Now you are speaking clearly and without figures of speech. Now we can see that you know all things, and that you do not even need to have anyone ask you questions. This makes us believe that you came from God." "Do you now believe?" Jesus replied. "A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. I have told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world."
The passage is John chapter 16 and verses 16 to 33. And I want you to, first of all, to think for a moment about the benefits or restrictions of hindsight. You know, sometimes if you go to the optician, they say that, and it's a long time since anybody said this to me, but I guess when I went to the optician 18 months ago, they said this, 20/20 vision, Reverend Hirst, they said. They don't say that anymore. But that is the measure of good eyesight. Now, a common phrase in the modern world is that hindsight is always 20/20. That you may not understand something going into a situation, but afterwards, when you think about it, you understand it perfectly because you have lived it. Now, there is a complication for us in reading this passage. And the problem here is hindsight. It brings to us a problem that the disciples didn't have. because to a certain degree, they could only guess about what Jesus was saying. Now, the problem here is that sometimes when we guess about this passage, we guess wrongly. Because Jesus says, in a little while, this is verse 16, in a little while you'll see me no more, and then after a little time you will see me. And our minds leap forward and we say, oh, Jesus is obviously referring to the second coming here. Wrong. Jesus made it quite clear that he didn't know, whilst he was involved in his earthly ministry, the day and time on which he would return in his second coming. This was known only to the Father, he said. And this is our first clue that he's not speaking of the second coming. But in order really to get a handle on this, we need to think in some regards, and this is where I get confusing now, that the second coming in some respects is the third coming. Okay, Darren, I don't understand at all what you're talking about now. And this is the thing about hindsight. But for the disciples, and if you will accept it for you, the second coming in that sense was the resurrection. And this is why Jesus can say with immense accuracy, in a little while. Because it would not even be 72 hours. It would be the morning of the third day when he returned. And it was also, as he predicted in verse 20, that it would be the case between the time when he was speaking now and the time when he would return, that the disciples would weep and mourn. Now, we don't weep and mourn about the crucifixion anymore, because we know that after the crucifixion there comes the resurrection. But the disciples didn't know that. They didn't have the benefit of that hindsight. They thought that their weeping and mourning would be a constant part of their life. I was speaking a few weeks ago about a preacher who had the benefit of being a traveling preacher, and therefore I heard him many times, and sometimes I thought, well, this guy's only got 6 sermons or something like that, because he would preach in different cities, and you'd find out that he would always preach one of the sermons you'd already heard. A guy called Tony Campolo. If anybody remembers the old Sergeant Bilko television series, he looked an awful lot like the guy who played Sergeant Bilko. And I once had dinner with him, and close up he looked even more uncannily like that actor. But I mentioned the other week about a sermon he used to preach about the fact that he used to go to a cafe of an evening where prostitutes used to hang out. And when he found out that one of the prostitutes was celebrating a birthday, he purchased a birthday cake that people at the bottom end of society could feel respected. And when somebody asked him after that what kind of church he would like to be in charge of, he said he would like to be in charge of a church that is the kind of church that buys birthday cakes for prostitutes, which always used to make me smile. But he had another sermon that I particularly remember, which went in blocks, as sermons often do. And at the end of every block, he would say in a very loud voice, "It's Friday, but Sundays are coming." And this was a reference to that in the Christian church, we know that when Jesus was crucified on Good Friday, he was going to be raised from the dead on the Sunday, to such an extent that now we call the Friday Good Friday. You know, our Lord and Master was crucified. He was tortured to death. But we call it Good Friday, because we know, although it's Friday, Sundays are coming. And the disciples, when Jesus told them that he was going away, didn't understand this. But this is part of what is necessary for the Christian faith to function. I read in the news last night that a singer who I was aware of passed away. Not particularly my taste in music, although he had a very pleasant voice. He was born Billy Joe Thomas, and he became known when he played baseball at college as B.J. Thomas, because there were lots of Billies in the college baseball team. Now, you might say to me, Darren, I've never heard of this guy. Who is B.J. Thomas? Well, if you've ever seen at all the film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, anybody ever seen that? Yeah? Paul Newman and Robert Redford, I think, in that film. He sang the song that was the heart of the conclusion of the film, a song called "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head," later on popularized by Sacha Distel as well, I think, in this country, but he's got nothing to do with this story. B.J. Thomas, however, was raised in a Baptist church, and after he became a Christian, after he became, we'll come to the bit where he becomes a Christian later. After he became successful, he fell into an addiction to cocaine. And when the film came along, and he wasn't the songwriter's first choice to be the singer. The songwriter apparently phrased the nature of the song so it could be sung by somebody like Bob Dylan, which, if you think about it, if you know the song, would have made it a hugely different song. And then he wanted it to be sung by Ray Stevens, who was a kind of a country comedy singer. And that would have made it different. But Burt Bacharach, who was the songwriter, found out that neither of those wanted to touch this song with a barge pole. And then he offered it to B.J. Stevens. And B.J. Thomas, I'll get there right in a minute. B.J. Thomas said, yeah, I'll do it. And it became hugely successful because of its role in that film. And it's a very dangerous thing, you know. B.J. Thomas, as I've said, had a drug problem, and he became very well known and therefore quite rich by singing this song. And you throw money and drugs together, that's a problem. And his marriage nearly collapsed, and difficult days. And then 6 years later, he went back to church, the Baptist church where he grew up. And he refound faith on the basis that he had been taught all those years ago. And he recorded an album of gospel songs called Home, Where I Belong. And he wrote a very successful autobiography called Home, Where I Belong. And now he became successful, but he had the tools to manage it. And he said that in all of this, God's hand was in control. God's hand was guiding. Because although in his later life he realized that he wouldn't have chosen to go down some of the paths that he went down, he realized that having gone down those paths prepared him to meet God. Because if you don't know that you have done something wrong, then you don't understand your need. And I guess in a way it's a little bit like that song, you know, raindrops keep falling on my head, but I'm not going to stop the rain by complaining. You know, here was a difficult situation he was going through, but also here was a song that made him as a known singer, at least in America. The other thing that happened, and I find this the most amusing part of the story, is that he nearly pulled out of recording the song at the last minute, because in the week of the recording, he developed laryngitis. And singing when you have laryngitis, especially when you have a sweet voice, that's no easy thing. I guess if you're Bob Dylan and you get laryngitis, then nobody notices the difference. But if you've got a sweet voice, then that's pretty tough. And he went into the recording studio anyway. And many people who heard the song said, "Is that Paul Newman singing?" Because it gave a little bit of an edge to his voice which sounded like the actor and meant that the song fitted all the better into the film. And you might say, well, if the song had been a flop, then maybe his life would have been better. But if Jesus hadn't have died and gone to the Father, then the resurrection makes no sense. God uses pain and joy in our lives to bring us to the place where we need to be. You know, the song that I'm fond of by another singer, it's a band called Maze, and the lead singer is a guy called Frankie Beverly. I'm getting all these tidbits here, and they're hoping I'm going to get some royalties out of these people. But B.J. Thomas is not really my cup of tea. Maze featuring Frankie Beverly, if you enter into iTunes, then this is, I get a penny. And they have a song called Joy and Pain. And the notion in the song is that joy and pain are like sunshine and rain. Without the two of them, nothing makes any sense. If you're going through a painful situation at the moment, and who of us is not? But some situations are worse than others. Then God will bring out of that something better down the road. I once read a book that said, if you have a cancer, thank God for the cancer. Now, to me, this is a hideous blasphemy of an idea. The things that happen to us in this world that are cruel are not the way that God made things to be. It is because the world is screwed up. When we are living through cruelty and pain and grief, look for the other side. And for us, the other side may come next week. It may come in 2 weeks' time. It may come in a month. It may be like the disciples, the morning of the third day. It might not come this side of heaven, but it will come. And the promise of heaven is the ultimate thing. And Jesus is telling this to the disciples that they might think back. And I know it seems like I've been preaching on this book of the Bible forever. But, you know, if you think back just a couple of chapters, chapter 14 of John's Gospel, which in reality was about 10 weeks ago in this church where we progress slowly. Jesus said, I'm going away to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. We call it heaven. It is invisible to us now, but then it will be visible to us. And if we don't find our comfort in this world, we must wait, because heaven is not to be rushed any more than the resurrection was to be rushed, or that the crucifixion could be skipped and it was straight on to the resurrection, or the resurrection could be skipped and it was right on to the time of the second coming, the other coming, whatever you want to call it. These things take time, and there is an order. And wading through pain can sometimes be wading through a lake of treacle or molasses or something like that. You know, when I was a kid, I don't know if you get these things anymore. I haven't seen it on television for ages. But used to get television programs and a series of films about Tarzan. Yeah? People know Tarzan? Okay. He had a kind of an unusual kind of wail going on and swung from vines and things. And when you're a kid and you watch Tarzan, you learn one thing very quickly. You learn that one of the great dangers in life that you're going to have to face throughout your life is quicksand. And it's been a great disappointment to me that I'm now a lot older And I've never encountered any quicksand because I knew what to do if I fell into quicksand because I'd watched Tarzan. Because if you fell into quicksand, you kept very still. Because if you struggled against it, it sucked you in. And once it got hold of you, then you weren't coming back. And so sometimes, I think this is why I'm using the illustration, sometimes when there is trouble, learn to be still. It's another song title, you see. Song by a band called Eagles. It's on their album, Hell Freezes Over. It's another penny in my money box. I used to work with that band, so there you go. Learn to be still, that's a good idea. And even after Jesus has told them about all of this comfort, he warns them one more time of trouble coming. He says, after they have said that, oh, now we understand. Now everything's going to be all right because we understand. He says in verse 31, almost, do you now believe? He says, a time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered. You think you trust in me because of what I have told you. But when I am taken, you're going to run away. And it is a great thing in this life to be prepared for trouble that comes. But sometimes when trouble comes, even though we think we're really prepared, we found out we're not prepared enough. So in those troubled situations, let us be ready, or as ready as we can. And let us know that better times are ahead. In some respect, my story about B.J. Thomas doesn't have that great an ending. Over this weekend, he died of cancer. But he believed, and therefore he will be in heaven, where no raindrops will fall upon his head. Or if they do, they'll be nice ones. And for us, we live in a world full of trouble. But trouble will pass, and we must be people who wait it out for better times ahead, either in this world or in the world to come. Amen.